What is up, everybody? Welcome back into another DLF YouTube channel video. Today it's Tuesday, so it's mock draft day, so I'm ready to get things rolling. And to be honest, we've been doing dynasty mock drafts for the past 3 days, but this is the last Tuesday in July. We're going to be kicking in here into August, and then before we even know it, it's going to be the preseason. It's going to be full-on training camp, then the actual NFL season. So I'm just way too excited. I'm actually just going to start pumping out some redraft mock drafts here. I have my personal home league in a couple weeks here, in 2 weeks, on Sunday, August 8th. So I am ready to go for that. I am ready to go for these mock drafts, and I'm just super excited that we're going to have football here very, very soon in just a little bit over a month. So I'm ready to get this thing going for some redraft mock drafts. So let's get into the video. This is a redraft mock draft. We're going to be using the Sleeper platform to mock. I think it's going to be really, really good, and it's pretty solid AI for a redraft league as well. This is just going to be a pretty normal PPR league. Start 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end. I made it 2 flex just to add a little extra spice, and then we got the bench spots to fill in here. So we have 13 rounds of players that we can talk about. I didn't really include kickers or defense because whatever about them, those can just be 2 of your last 3 picks or your last 2 picks. But I wanted to see what this draft actually looked like because I haven't actually done any best balls yet. I haven't done any redrafts yet. I don't know really why I haven't, but that's just kind of where I've been at for this summer. So I wanted to test my theory of that I want to be in the top of the draft. I want one of the 4 or maybe 5 running backs in CMC, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry, and Saquon Barkley. I want one of those 5 players, and then I want to see how the rest of the board falls. In general, my redraft strategy the past couple of years and this year again is robust running back at the beginning of the draft in the first 2 or maybe even 3 rounds, and then grab wide receivers in those mid rounds, and then finish out with your quarterback and the rest of your running backs and wide receivers. Tight ends, I'm pretty cool taking a solid tight end, in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th round. I'm cool waiting on tight ends. It just kind of depends on the value for me at that position in terms of where I'm actually going to take them. But I definitely would be looking for, potentially like Darren Waller in the late 2nd or early 3rd in this 2-3 turn, or, see where I'm at with Kyle Pitts or TJ Hawkinson, stuff like that. But we'll get into that here, and we can start this draft off because I selected the 1.02. I wanted to see how things were going to go. And for some reason, I'm getting Christian McCaffrey, which I'm very happy about. The 1.02 basically for me, and why I picked that, if you are in a redraft league that allows you to pick your spot, I just picked 1.02 because I figured that gave me, the choice between Christian McCaffrey or Dalvin Cook, one or the other. I would favor Christian McCaffrey of the 2, but it, allowed me and guaranteed me to get one of those 2 players. And then I also can get a little bit of preference here at the 211 over the guy that drafted at the 212. I don't really know why that matters. Maybe that's just my psychology, but yeah, that just kind of is where we're at. So we're here now, again, 211 and then 2 picks and then my pick again. So looking at the way that this board is going, Patrick Mahomes already went at the 2.05, which is pretty crazy. Travis Kelce went at the 111, which I would expect him to be a first rounder in most of your PPR leagues, if not all. I could see him anywhere from being a top 5 pick all the way down to a late first, like this was here at the 111. A lot of running backs, obviously, a handful of wide receivers. So here at the 211, like I said, I'm really just looking at these running backs. I want to start off with a couple fantastic running backs to really shore up my depth chart on there, while also giving me some firepower. So I want to add somebody to Christian McCaffrey, and I'm looking at this list here between Antonio Gibson, DeAndre Swift, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I like all 3 of those guys, and I'm really just debating on which one I want to take out of those 3. You also could look at the tight end position. Like I said, George Kittle and Darren Waller are there, and I'm definitely comfortable with taking Darren Waller here in the late 2nd, or maybe see if I can get him in that 3rd round. So what I think I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to take Darren Waller because I was looking at, Gibson, DeAndre Swift, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. All 3 of those running backs I'm very happy with and would be comfortable taking all 3 of those players. So you can play a little bit draft board strategy here. I'm going to take Darren Waller here because that guarantees me he only has 2 selections here, right? So that guarantees me one of these 3 running backs is coming back to me, whereas it wouldn't necessarily guarantee me that Darren Waller would come back to me in the 3rd round. So I'm going to take Darren Waller. He took George Kittle and then Josh Jacobs. So you know, I'm just back to this decision again between Gibson, Swift, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think I'm just going to end up going with the post-hype sleeper. I guess not really post-hype sleeper, but post-hype player in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'm going to make him my RB2 with Christian McCaffrey. I like Clyde Edwards-Helaire because I think he's going to have a nice bounce back year. Even though he wasn't bad at all last year. He was an RB1 over the first 12 weeks of the season before he got hurt. That includes now with Le'Veon Bell being added for those couple of weeks as well. And so Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it's just him in the backfield with Darrell Williams. There's no other competition. They lost Sammy Watkins, so there's, potential for more targets to open up in this offense, depending on how Mecole Hardman or Demarcus Robinson end up, fulfilling that wide receiver 2 role. But it's Tyreek Hill, it's Travis Kelce, and then it's going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire, in my opinion. So Helaire is going to be fantastic. I like him as my RB2 in this 3rd round. And I like pairing him with Christian McCaffrey as well. I got my explosiveness in McCaffrey. I think I got a nice floor in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and we can see where we keep on going now throughout the rest of these mid-rounds. As it's getting going here, the back end of the 3rd and the 4th and 5th rounds are going to be where a lot of these wide receivers come off the board, because a lot of these running backs, it gets really, really ugly kind of quick. I'm still here with Chris Carson, Travis Etienne, Kareem Hunt, Myles Gaskin, James Robinson, Javonte Williams, and then it gets kind of gross after that as well. The wide receivers are starting to thin out a little bit, in terms of the high explosive players and who you can get out of those. But Darren Waller to me is basically my wide receiver 1, just playing at the tight end position. So you can look at it that way and then just kind of fill in your wide receivers from there. So I don't need a tight end. I'm definitely done with that. So I can just kind of wait a little bit on that position too if I wanted to. Quarterbacks, I'm not looking. It's only been Patrick Mahomes and Kyler Murray. I'm not worried about Lamar Jackson or Russell Wilson or Dak or anything like that. Josh Allen went at the back end of the 3rd. So I'm not worried about quarterbacks right there either. To be honest, I'm looking at the running back position again because Chris Carson is still sitting right there. And I know a lot of people have debated, would you rather have Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Chris Carson? Because Chris Carson is pretty good in that Seahawks offense. So I'm just going to take Chris Carson here as my RB3, my flex player. This is a 2 flex lead, so he's my first flex player. But if you have a 1 flex, he would be your flex guy. And I love that a lot because that allows me now, I have 3 really good RB2s to high upside, RB1s or the overall RB1 in Christian McCaffrey. So that gives me some solid running back depth in terms of my depth chart. And now I can kind of just start streaming these wide receiver positions and just plugging and playing as we go along. And I don't really need to look at the running back position all that much going down the road. Maybe if there's some value later on or a couple high upside handcuffs I could potentially grab just to roster, I can definitely do that, but I don't need to be looking really super hard at the running back position. I can now turn my attention fully to that wide receiver position since I also have the tight end as well, and then just see where we go with the quarterback position. So looking at the wide receiver position, there are a lot of fantastic options here. I mean, Adam Thielen's great. CeeDee Lamb is great. Kenny Golladay, in my opinion, is great as well. And then a bunch of other guys that you would view more as maybe a wide receiver 2, which in this case, to me, is probably going to be the case because, like I said, Darren Waller is more or less my wide receiver 1. But I'm really looking here. I'm surprised CeeDee Lamb made it this far. CeeDee Lamb in the 5th round, to me, is a value at that ADP, especially a whole round after Amari Cooper. He could just as easily, I think, lead this team in targets, even though I do think that, and I would give the edge to Amari Cooper doing that. CeeDee Lamb is absolutely fantastic, and him operating mainly out of the slot, while that might diminish his overall ceiling and true upside in terms of just on a yearly basis, right? He might not be like a top 5 wide receiver because he's operating mainly out of the slot, but that gives you some consistency. It gives you some floor, and I love him operating out of the slot because he's going to be up against, lesser cornerbacks from other teams, right? So CeeDee Lamb as my wide receiver 1 or my wide receiver 1B to Darren Waller in the 5th round is fantastic, and I absolutely love this build, and I really, really like where this is heading. So this might be honestly the direction that I end up going with because and really just justifying my priors here with how these redraft leagues are going to work out. So we're here at the 6-11. A couple more quarterbacks went off the board. Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert. This is where Kyle Pitts and TJ Hawkinson went as well at the tight end position. If you've been trying to gauge where those two are going, Mark Andrews went in the mid-4th round. So this is where we're at here in the 6th round. And again, I'm just looking at this wide receiver position, and I'm going to see kind of, where we're heading. And the next guy that I'm going to take here is Diontae Johnson. I like Diontae Johnson because he was fantastic last year in terms of being targeted. His target volume was like top 10 in the league. He had nearly 150 targets. I don't know if a lot of people actually realize the number of targets that he received. And he only really had, I think, 3 or 4 games last year total out of the games that he played where he didn't have double-digit touchdowns. And most of those games were, the couple games that he was benched or he got hurt early. And the other one was like week 17, I think, was ultimately those few games where he wasn't targeted double-digit times per game with Ben Roethlisberger. So this whole offense is basically just on, repeat from last year. I know that they added Najee Harris as well, and some people expect Najee to, kind of cut into what Diontae and Juju Smith-Schuster had from last year. But I think this team is still going to be super pass heavy, and I think that they're obviously going to go for it because Big Ben needs to go for it. So this is a fantastic price point, I think, in my opinion, for Diontae Johnson. And I love grabbing him as my wide receiver 2 with CeeDee Lamb. And I love ultimately the way that this direction and this team is heading. So here I was just kind of curious in terms of where the running backs were. We're looking at Melvin Gordon, Chase Edmonds, Raheem Mostert, Ron Jones, James Conner, Michael Carter, Trey Sermon. Don't really like any of those guys. And this is kind of where I was saying that, if you go running back early, it allows you to pass on these guys in favor of the other wide receivers that we know or at least project to be pretty much better than all of these running backs that you have, right? So if you're that team like over here that went Tyreek Hill, then Patrick Mahomes, and then Mark Andrews as 3 of your first 4 picks, and then Lockett and Brandon Ayuk, Antonio Gibson's great, but like your RB2 is now going to be one of these guys down here that I don't necessarily like versus, you can build out kind of like how I built out, or team 1, team 3, team 4, you can go robust running back and kind of fade away from these mid-round running backs. And then that allows you to attack that wide receiver position over the middle rounds and on in the rest of your draft. So I just kind of wanted to show that in terms of validation for why, you should probably go robust running back. But that also probably just depends overall on where you are in your draft position. But honestly, it's pretty hard to not go running back in your first 2 rounds, or running back other position running back in your first 3 rounds, just to solidify yourself at least 2 of those great running backs in the top 12 or 15, depending on where you are in the actual draft itself. But here in the 7th round, I'm just going to go with Courtland Sutton, the wide receiver 1 for the Denver Broncos, or the wide receiver 1A to the 1B of Jerry Jeudy for the Denver Broncos. I think we forget how good Courtland Sutton actually can be in this Broncos offense, and no matter who really the quarterback is, just because he was hurt all of last year with the torn ACL, basically. So Courtland Sutton is an alpha wide receiver. He is fantastic. He's going to be the primary outside guy. So he's like the Mike Evans to Jerry Jeudy's Chris Godwin, basically. So I really like having the shot on Courtland Sutton there in the 7th round as my wide receiver 3. I like that a lot, and he's definitely going to be, in my opinion, has some high upside explosive weeks while also giving me somewhat of a pretty decent floor there, in my opinion. And I like him a lot there, like I said, in the 7th round as my wide receiver 3. So here in the 8th round, I'm just kind of looking around again. The running backs are still pretty gross. This is where a lot of these guys start coming off the board. The wide receivers are still pretty solid overall. There's definitely some dart throws that you can throw here. I don't really need to be looking at the tight end position because I have Darren Waller, so I don't really need to go there. The quarterback one is really interesting, though, because Tom Brady and Jalen Hurts are sitting right here at the 8th or 9th round. And, there's a lot of upside in both of those guys, right? Like, I absolutely love Tom Brady. I think he has the potential to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback this year. 2nd year in the Bruce Arians offense. He has a full offseason now with Antonio Brown. And he also obviously has Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and then whatever the running backs want to add into that as well with the addition of Giovanni Bernard too. I think Tom Brady has a realistic shot of throwing for, well over 4,500 yards and 30 plus touchdowns, which is going to be a fantastic fantasy quarterback for you in your fantasy league. So I like Tom Brady. I also like Jalen Hurts a lot too, because he offers that Konami code kind of quarterback where he is a primary rushing quarterback too. Sleeper has him projected here for over 119 rush attempts for 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. And while the passing might not be there, even though they added the last year's Heisman Trophy winner in Devonta Smith, the passing might not be there on a week-to-week basis, but this dude has some high upside and some high ceilings in games based on, that rushing ability that he brings to the table. So I like taking the shot here on either one of those two. I think I'm going to just go a little bit more conservative, and I'm just going to take Tom Brady here over Jalen Hurts. I think that's just kind of personal preference for me, but I'm totally fine with you taking Jalen Hurts, or if you want to continue to wait, there's other guys down here. I expect Ryan Tannehill to be gone by the time we get back in the 10th round. There's other guys here too. I think Taysom Hill would be a great shot late. I think Trey Lance would be a great shot late. There's a bunch of other guys that you can definitely offer you similar upside if they get the starts or based on how long they actually play than you would here in the 8th, 9th round. But I like taking Tom Brady there at the end of the 8th round to solidify my whole entire starting lineup and be looking really, really good here. And I only have 5 more picks, 5 more players that I can add and just stash on my bench here as we round this one out. So the running back position, I still don't really like. Again, this is just kind of perks of going robust running back at the beginning of your draft, is I don't really like any of these guys, so I don't really need to be looking at any of them. Instead, I can move to the wide receiver position, and this is where you can start swinging for upside. Yeah, it might be fun to take Tyler Boyd, but what kind of upside does he truly have? What kind of upside does Bateman and Corey Davis truly have? If you can't really swing a really good, home run swinging type of player argument for any of these guys, I'm not really looking to get them. While that consistency might not be great, I'm not really looking to start all of these guys, especially once you get into your 9th, 10th, 11th rounds and later. I'm not really looking to start these guys unless, ultimately they become kind of every week starters because they have that high upside. The first one that I'm going to take is Antonio Brown, just kind of pairing with Tom Brady. AB absolutely has, I think, a fantastic shot to be a near 1,000-yard receiver, if not better. Tom Brady absolutely loves to look at him. The last half of the season last year when AB, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin all played, they all averaged over 8 targets per game. So this is a fantastic discount on still a really, really talented wide receiver in an offense that, he could be seen as the wide receiver 3, but on any given week, he could be the wide receiver 1 to the wide receiver 4 in targets. But I'm really chasing those spike weeks. And I think Antonio Brown is like the perfect late round wide receiver to just go for and see what happens and stash him on your bench in your draft. So this is where I'm at with Antonio Brown. And now we're up in the 10th round here. Still looking at these wide receivers are still pretty solid here. But the running back position now is really starting to, grab some of my attention here because we have some high upside backups that we can add in here while also having some players that could offer, some standalone value. The first one of that is AJ Dillon. I like him a lot. Tony Pollard, Latavius Murray, Jamal Williams, JD McKissick. I think all of these guys could be really, really good with their starter still healthy. But if that starter goes down, like we saw with Darrell Henderson was being drafted in this range, Cam Akers goes down. Now he gets bumped up 5, 6, 7 rounds. That's kind of the value spike that you can see from these backups if their starter does go down. And that's why I really like to attack and have, as many as I can that could make that jump on my roster. So here I am going to take AJ Dillon because I think he offers standalone value as the RB2 with Aaron Jones in that Green Bay Packers offense with and without Aaron Rodgers. That doesn't really matter to me. But if Aaron Jones were to miss time or were to have, weeks here and there, maybe he has a hamstring or an ankle injury and he misses a week, or God forbid, knock on wood, that he actually, has like a really serious injury, AJ Dillon is going to be that dude. He's going to be, in my starting lineup somewhere in there because he's going to be great if Aaron Jones were to go down. But like I said, still offers standalone value as the RB2 with Aaron Jones. So I like taking AJ Dillon there in the 10th round. I was also looking at Mike Williams. I was kind of hoping that Mike Williams would come back as well as the wide receiver 2 to Justin Herbert with Keenan Allen and all that stuff in that Chargers offense. But I ended up going with AJ Dillon there just to kind of add some balance to my roster in terms of my wide receivers and running backs breakdown, because I have now 4 of each, and then the tight end and the quarterback. So 11th round here, we got 3 picks left. We'll try to make these quick and get through here. But 11th round, I'm looking at Darnell Mooney. I think could be pretty solid. Elijah Moore has some upside to him. Or those running backs, like I said, Tony Pollard is still there. Latavius Murray is still there. I am going to take Darnell Mooney. I would have probably taken him here anyway before the Anthony Miller trade, but then after the Anthony Miller trade, obviously that super solidifies Darnell Mooney as the wide receiver 2, even though I really don't believe that Anthony Miller had any effect whatsoever on Darnell Mooney's outlook for 2021. But I guess it's just like one less player on that Bears offense that's going to take away like 30, 40 targets. And those 30-40 targets could potentially get broken down a little bit towards Darnell Mooney now. And then obviously, of course, you can spin that upside. Justin Fields comes in instead of Andy Dalton and just kind of lights the world on fire like we saw with Justin Herbert last year. There's potential for that to happen, on top of the fact that Darnell Mooney is also a very talented and explosive wide receiver as well, and fits very well across from Allen Robinson, who's much more the prototypical big body wide receiver, who's not really, getting ultra super separation, but is going to win in the intermediate routes as well. And Darnell Mooney can win in the long routes, in the deep routes. And that's really where you like to see your high upside players, and why I like to chase that type of upside and those types of players in these later rounds. So I like Darnell Mooney there as my wide receiver 5 in the 11th round. So 12-13 turn here. Let's see what we got, because I think I'm pretty solid on wide receivers. I feel pretty good about my running backs as well, even though it's a little shallow in terms of only having 4. I have Christian McCaffrey, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Chris Carson as 3 of those guys. Maybe I grab one more here, or maybe I'm looking at this quarterback room. It was unfortunate that Trey Lance went. I really, really like Trey Lance and having that opportunity to take him late in drafts just to see what happens, because I think he has the ultimate Konami code. He rushed for 1,000 yards just 2 years ago at North Dakota State. So I like that a lot as a high upside flyer, and I think he starts a lot earlier than a lot of people expect, if not even potentially week 1 if Jimmy Garoppolo is traded before the start of the season. So here in the 12th round, man, you can do multiple different ways. I like Tua Tagovailoa. I like him as a potential upside player. I like some of these other quarterbacks as well if you just want to go for ultra upside, like Daniel Jones, maybe some Zach Wilson as well, because I feel like people forget about him, and he is for sure starting week 1 for the New York Jets and has a pretty low-key solid wide receiver core as well. And obviously the new offense is not Adam Gase. I think I'm just going to take Taysom Hill here. I think Taysom Hill, honestly, I think he starts. I think he starts week 1 for the New Orleans Saints, and he was fantastic last year for fantasy, even though, the passing, it's kind of the same thing with Jalen Hurts. The passing might not be there, but that rushing is definitely there, and he's going to offer you and give you that for fantasy football. And quarterback position, at that position, it's so key and clutch to chase those guys with that rushing upside this late in your drafts if you're looking for those types of quarterbacks. And Taysom Hill fits that mold. And so I like grabbing him here as my QB2. I can plug and play him with Tom Brady, see what happens, and then ultimately, if Hill does get benched for Jameis Winston at some point during the season, or doesn't even start at all, I still have Tom Brady. So finally here in the 13th round, I'm just going to close out with Latavius Murray, kind of the same argument with AJ Dillon. I really honestly, now that Michael Thomas is, going to miss half the season, potentially, if not more, we could see an offense here for the New Orleans Saints where both Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray are out on the field at the same time, because Alvin Kamara can give you that wide receiver type, role and position in that offense. And then Latavius Murray can kind of also be out there, as a actual running back to hand the ball off to in options or with Taysom Hill or whatnot. So I think that might honestly be the direction that the Saints and Sean Payton actually end up going, is they want as many playmakers out there as possible with Michael Thomas out. And so if you have Taysom Hill at quarterback, who offers some rushing ability as well in that position, as well as passing, you have Alvin Kamara, who can run or, catch the ball as well as any wide receiver, and then obviously does phenomenal things with the ball in his hands. Latavius Murray, I think, is also really, really good as well as more of a traditional running back. Then you have Traquan Smith, Adam Troutman. That right there, could be the starting lineup that we see in most cases and most situations for the New Orleans Saints, as well as if they want some, high upside kind of ceiling guys like Marquez Callaway or Deontay Harris, stuff like that. But I do believe that we're going to see many times where Latavius Murray and Alvin Kamara are out on the field at the same time, and that's going to make Latavius Murray valuable. Not to mention, God forbid, again, knock on wood, if Alvin Kamara were to get hurt, Latavius Murray is an RB2 for like top 15 for sure that week, if not an RB1 for as many weeks as Alvin Kamara is out. So he's a plug and play auto start for you in your leagues and in your lineup. And that's just, an easy one to have and kind of beat the waiver wire a little bit there too. So I really like the way that this team actually ended up going here. We can look at it: Tom Brady, Christian McCaffrey, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, CeeDee Lamb, Diontae Johnson, Darren Waller, Chris Carson, Courtland Sutton, and then the upside players in Antonio Brown, AJ Dillon, Darnell Mooney, Taysom Hill, and Latavius Murray. And then obviously 14th, 15th round, just grab your kicker and your defense, and you're good to go. And that's the way that we're going here for this mock draft. So thank you all so much for watching and for tuning in. Click here if you want to watch a dynasty mock draft from last week as well in a 1 quarterback league. And then with that all being said, guys, we'll catch y'all later.